I considered myself wealthy. I think I sold something like 5 or 6 pelts. God, in the Pier Park stunk for about a week. I mean, the smell of skunks in that area, and no one knew. No one knew. And my mother, to the day she died, didn't know it was me. I would never tell her. I had lots of dates. Because I'll say, once you have wings and bars, they flock. I did a fabulous job. The guys were, they wanted an encore, but I didn't have another song. Piece of flak come right through my table. Put a hole in the table about 2 inches around. If I was I wouldn't be here. I would have had no head or anything. My 14th mission was terrible. It was then I should have realized this is a girl. We have a baby for you. And I said, tell her we're going on vacation. It's God, family, faith, and country.
So we left off with you getting on the boat.
Well, they took us to actually a banana boat, and it really was a Grace Line fruit boat. And there were 254 all flying personnel. And we left New York. It was the first time I'd ever seen the Statue of Liberty. 21 years old, living around in New York, I'd never seen the Statue of Liberty before. So it was the first time. So I was with the rest of the Hicks, looking off the railing, seeing the Statue of Liberty. We were in a very slow convoy. It took us about 12 days to make the crossing. But on the way, 2 things happened. Number one, we had a major who was our transportation officer. Half of us, not quite half, were officers, and the other 40% officers and 60% non-coms. This guy had us out on the deck doing calisthenics, and I was saying, well, he's crazy. But he got sick. I mean, he got sick. He had made the crossing about 8 times before, but he got sick. We made sure he stayed sick. We would bring him some runny eggs in the morning, greasy bacon. No, he stayed sick the rest of the trip. And now we had the run of the ship, and some of the guys wanted to put on a show. Someone said to me, "You look skinny enough to be Frank Sinatra." And we had a wind-up phonograph and a Frank Sinatra record. And they said, "Why don't you take this and see if you can remember the words and mouth it?" So for 4 days, I mouthed it, and I mouthed it, and I rehearsed it, and I rehearsed it. Come the day of the show, I'm as close as you. These guys are all as close as I am. They had the ship's carpenter make a microphone for me, a stand-up microphone. I did a fabulous job. The guys were, they wanted an encore, but I didn't have another song. But those are the 2 stories going overseas. We landed in England, and from there we all dispersed to various squadrons and groups. I was assigned to the 752nd Squadron, 452nd Bomb Group, B-24s. That was our crew was. We did a lot of training over there too. Every time when we didn't have a mission, and we didn't have a bombing mission, our CO saw fit that we made sure we got some flight time in, and we do practice missions. I got to London quite often. I was in London one time when the V2s hit, and the guy got on the stage and said, the air raid code is orange. Those who want to leave, please do so quietly and slowly. About 10 minutes later, he said, nobody got up. I figured the Britishers don't get up, I'm not going to get up. About 10 minutes later, the bombs were dropping around him, and he said, the air raid warning is now red. Everyone, please slowly leave and go to the nearest air raid shelter. We did. And it was then I decided, I don't think I'm going to come to London too often. I'm safer at my own base. And that was one of my trips to London.
So when you first got to the base, what happened there?
Got to the base. We lived in. We were fortunate. It was an ex-RAF base that the 8th Air Force had taken over. So we lived in. Myself, my 2 pilots. We didn't have a bombardier. We lived in permanent housing. We lived in brick housing. We had a 2-room suite. We had a sitting room, small sitting room, and our bedroom. There were three bunks in the bedroom. And we being introduced around at the officers' club, and they were telling us, "Oh, you should have broken a leg, or you should have shot yourself, you should have done anything, then come here." Now, it's a camaraderie in the Air Force, flyers in the Air Force that you don't find anywhere else except maybe on a submarine, because we were all so close, and we lived so close. We eat, drink, and fly together. On my first mission, I only remember a couple of missions. On my first mission, after the bombs were dropped, I'm in the front of a B-24, standing backwards. I have a table. I have to go through a tunnel to get from the flight deck to the nose section of the plane, and I have a pull-down table with my maps. I have 2 windows. A window on this side, a window on that side, very small, and have an astrodome above me. Shoot stars if we were going to do anything nighttime. Dropped the bombs at Magdeburg, Germany, which is about 40 kilometers west of Berlin. So I looked out that side window to see where the bombs hit. Piece of flak come right through my table. Put a hole in the table about 2 inches around. If I was I wouldn't be here. I would have had no head or anything. That was, from then on, I tell you, scared. I was scared. I still remember. My nickname then became Flak Happy Frank. But that was the first mission. Being overseas was fun too, when I wasn't flying. We had a great officers club. We had 2 officers clubs. We had one officers club, which was the main officers club for the base. And we had Flyers Officers Club, captains and below, lieutenants and captains only. No one else was allowed. When we were having our 200th mission party, when the group flew its 200th mission, we told them that you couldn't have the mission, you couldn't have the party at our club. We told the higher ups, so we had it at the main club, because if you didn't have wings, you were not allowed in our officers club. That was just not allowed, because the big sign out says captains on down, flying officers only. I finally, at the end of my tour there, I lived upstairs in the officers club. But we had this 200th mission party. Jimmy Stewart was there. Elliot Roosevelt was there, to name a few that I know. And I was with 3 of my buddies. And it was my turn to go up and get pints of beer. So I'm up at the bar getting the beer, and they were sitting in the back. Now I have 4 pints like this, and turn around, and some guy knocks right into me. And I says, "You dumb son of a..." I look up, and he's got a star. He's a general. He says, "Lieutenant, my fault, Lieutenant. Excuse me, my fault." I says, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir." He says, "My fault." He says, "Where are you sitting?" I says, "I'm back there," and I pointed to where the table was. He says, "I'll bring you the beers." So I get to the table, and my guy's saying, "Where's the beer?" I says, "I got my waiter bring him." Here comes a general. He says, "Okay, Lieutenant." He puts the beers down. And the guy said, "How the hell did you ever wangle that?" I said, "It's a long story." But that was fun. I flew 15 missions with my crew. They decided to send me to radar school to be a lead navigator. So I was at the base in Huntington, England, which is just outside Cambridge. Like Glenn Miller flew off from just before then, and never heard from him again. So I did my radar training. That was about 5 weeks. I became a radar lead navigator. Flew some lead missions.
So what does that mean if you're a lead navigator?
Well, a lead navigator means I'm on the plane that leads the squadron. I'm flying with a pilot who's a lead pilot, lead co-pilot. We have a bombardier. We have 2, sometimes 3 navigators. I was the radar navigator. We sometimes have a Mickey was an instrument that was invented by the British to locate, to give us a fix, and then we would have a dead reckoning navigator. So between the 3 of us, if there was overcast, dead reckoning navigator couldn't see below, and it was up to me then to pick out where we were, because the radar would go through clouds and everything else. We even had one of the squadrons, not my squadron, but on a mission I was on, this other squadron bombed Switzerland because their radar navigator picked up a hill that looked like the town he was looking for, and it brought him about 50 kilometers south of course, and when he saw Lake Constantine, he picked it as a different lake in Austria, and they dropped their load right on this town in Switzerland. It was quite a to-do. As a matter of fact, my group navigator, my main navigator, wrote a book on me, which I have. It said "The Day We Bombed Switzerland." My lead days as a deputy lead or lead navigator were I don't even remember them, but I remember my first mission, and I remember my 14th mission. My 14th mission was terrible. It was, at that time, the largest mission, the largest air raid on Berlin. And my squadron was, as we call it, flying Purple Heart Charlie. We were the last low squadron. We had an easy target in Berlin, and that was to hit the marshalling yard, railroad marshalling yard, and then pull out north, and then take off for home. We got hit coming in to the target, and we're on what is known as the initial point IP. When you can't, no deviation, you can't evade flak, or you can't evade fighters. You can't do anything. You just have to fly straight, and that lasts for about 11 minutes. During those 11 minutes, we get hit in number 1 engine, and plane slipped to the side. Now I'm in the nose during this time, and I've got a kid in a nose turret. I was the oldest guy on that plane. I was only 21, and I had a kid in that nose turret, which I lock in because he's the gunner. He's the nose gunner. We get hit in that engine, and we slip down to the right. And then all of a sudden we get hit in number 4 engine, and we go into a flat spin. We drop from 24,000 feet down to about 11,000 feet in a flat spin. And the centrifugal force had me leaned up against the door of the nose turret, so I couldn't move. And afterwards, my two pilots had their feet up against the firewall, pulling back on the wheels, and they couldn't get the plane out, and we couldn't bail out because we were all stuck. We were all bouncing all over the place. So with two engines out, both engines on fire, and they finally were able to stop the engines and stop the props. At about 11,000 feet, this plane levels off all by itself. Now we got two inboard engines. I'm looking around. Now my pilot's saying, prepare to bail out. I said, you're crazy. No. I said, we just, look at what we did to Berlin. I said, we just firebombed Berlin. I said, if we bail out and somebody they'll kill us. I said, let's take our chances. So now we got two engines, and we're losing altitude, but not fast. But we've got to go from Berlin. We can't go across the Ruhr Valley because that's the most fortified area in Germany. So I got to navigate us all the way down to Koblenz, where the Rhine and the Moselle rivers meet. And we were losing altitude. And about 5,000 feet, we crossed the Rhine, and we come into that part of Germany, going up, and I give them a heading to go up to France. I figured if we can get into France, we'd be all right. And now we're doing okay now. All of a sudden, we start losing altitude quick. We're in France, and can't get a place. So we crashed the plane in outside Lille, France. I had two good pilots. They come in, belly up, wheels up, tore the right wing off. The engines were all over the place. Nobody got hurt. We checked around. Nobody got hurt. So we walked around, and there was a farmer told us there was an RAF base not too far. So we walked into this little village, and somehow the RAF must have seen us come down. So they sent a truck for us. We spent 4 days in France waiting to go back to England. And that was an experience I don't want to forget. To this day, I don't know if I was frightened. I guess I was too young and too stupid. But that was. And then the war ended. I finished my missions. The war ended, and I was in London. I met a pilot buddy of mine that I had been in cadets with. And he said, "How are you going home?" And I said, I'm waiting for the Queen Mary at that time. And he said, I'm taking a B-17 back. He said, we need another navigator, because we had to take 3 navigators. He said, see if you can come back with me. So he said, I'll have my CO call your CO or write to you, see if he can get you. So he did. He got me changed, and I said, wow, I'm going to get home now before the Queen. The Queen was still in New York, hadn't gotten to England yet. So we took off on a B-17, went to Scotland, went over to Greenland, Iceland, Newfoundland, Maine, Bradley Field, and Connecticut. Today, that would take 6 hours. It took me 11 days to fly. We got weathered. Now, this is the end of May. We got weathered in Greenland. I mean, the snowstorm was, we're at Thule. The snowstorm is unbelievable. So I'm there 4 days. Get to Iceland, fog all over Iceland. We couldn't take off. And now, and you can't sleep in Iceland or Greenland because it's daylight, 20 hours a day. Then we finally got to Newfoundland. We finally got home to Bradley Air Force Base outside Hartford. And the plane gets quarantined because some of the guys came up with a rash. So now I'm sitting at Bradley Air Force Base, and I haven't told my parents that I'm coming home. I couldn't tell them now, flying, because I was going to surprise them and come home in 4 days or three days. So I still didn't tell them. I finally got lifted from quarantine, and I hopped on a train, got into Yonkers. I'll tell you, I got into Grand Central, Penn Station, I think it was, and I hopped a cab, and the cabbie said to me, "Where you going?" I said, "Well, I'm originally going to Yonkers, but I had to get a train at Grand Central." He says, "Don't worry about it, flag down, or up, whatever it is." He says, "It's on me." So I said, "That's great." So I hopped on a train, got off at Yonkers, get on the number 5 trolley, figure I'm going to surprise everybody. June 10th, or about this time, get off the number 5 trolley at my favorite corner, looked in the store, corner store, different people on it. Walked home, which was only 10 houses away, got the stairs, put my bag down, tried the door, door's locked. Ring the bell, nobody home. Oh my God, I said, this is somehow. So I walked over to my aunt's. I figured, well, maybe my mother's at my aunt's, and there's where she was. So I was home for a week.
So what was it like when your mother saw you?
Yeah. She says, "We were worried about you because we didn't hear from you." I said, "Well, it's difficult for me to call when I'm up in the air." So, yeah. Everybody's surprised. Everybody's happy. But I was only home for a week. And then that week after that, I have a picture of the girls of Pier Park having a little party for me. And then I went down to Greenville, North Carolina for R&R, rest and recuperation. Why I needed it, I don't know. So I was there 2 weeks. Then I came home for a month. I was home the entire month of July. That's the first one home. Everybody else, all my buddies were still overseas or still in their bases. I was number 1 home. The only one who was home before me then was Johnny Quinlan. He came home with the Memphis Belle early in '44 to do a bond tour around the bond drive around the country. So I was home, and then little by little, Marty came. Bobby McElroy then came home. Sully Yonkers, who was wounded over in Europe, he was in the hospital in Washington. He came home. And then our 30 days, my 30 days are up, and they sent me to Boca Raton Country Club, Boca Raton, Florida. And that's where I lived. I was supposed to pick up a B-29 crew in Marchfield in San Francisco. And the day I was leaving, August 8th, the orderly came in and says, "Lieutenant, your orders are canceled." I said, "How come?" He says, "I don't know, something about a bomb." So I lived during that, all the month of August, all of September, half of October, at the country club. And that was good living. I went back there. Betty Ann and I went back there just this past winter. See what it was like. I bought a T-shirt for myself that said Boca Raton.
So what were you doing there?
Nothing.
That time?
Nothing. Just having fun. Go into Miami, hitchhike into Miami. I had a very good friend who was a pilot. We fly to Havana to get our flight time in. So I flew to Havana twice. You had to get 4 hours in to get my flight pay, and that was important because I was $87.50 a month. So my roommate there was a pilot who had been in cadets with me in the early days of cadets. His name was Jack Gold, and I would say he was movie star handsome. I mean, the guy was a knockout. We'd go to Miami, and the girls would be like goslings flocking around Mother Goose. So he met a girl there who was from New York, from Brooklyn, whose father was a retired garment manufacturer, who was loaded. I mean, she had a 1942 red Dodge convertible with white leather seats. And that was the last car, I think, made before the war. She got a date for me, and we'd tour around in this car. All the guys were saying, "Oh, look at these two guys. Where are they going, and how do they do this?" So for about 3 weeks, that's what we did. We traveled to the Tropicana Club in Miami, and we had a ball. I had a good time. The war was over as far as we were concerned, although the war in the Pacific was still on. When I first got to Boca Raton, I was supposed to pick up that B-29 crew and fly to Guam, and my brother was in Guam in the Marines. So I was happy I didn't, because I didn't want any more of the war. Enough was enough.
So when you were flying to Havana, did you actually stop there and spend time there, or you just flew and came back?
To Havana, we would land and stay there, not overnight. We'd stay there while they unload whatever they were doing, and we'd get into town, all right. Yeah.
What was it like?
I like Havana.
What was it like?
Oh, it was something I'd never seen before in my life. I mean, I'd been to Matamoros in Mexico when I was down at gunnery school, but Havana. I love Havana. My wife and I, Betty Ann and I, were there on a cruise, and I just like the people were so nice. Everything was nice about Havana. So I was there twice. Got my flight time in, drank my booze, and got out. And that was my last days in the Air Force.
So how did you find out when your time was up?
Oh, they told me. They come in time. It went by the point system, and the point system was a point for every month you're in the service, 2 points for every month you were overseas, 5 points for every battle star you had, 5 points for every citation. So I had 5 air medals, I had 3 battle stars. I had about 90 points, and all you needed was 72 to get out. So I was out early. I got out. Ironically, I left the Air Force almost 4 years to the day that I got married. I left there on October 15th, got home on the 16th. But my terminal leave, I was still on terminal, so I was still in the service really until November 16th of 45.
Now you're back home?
Now I'm back home. I'm back home. College had already started. It was November. So I hung around, just waited for everybody to come home, and we just hung around. A lot of the guys went back to work. I decided to go back to college. Actually, I wanted to stay in the Air Force, but my parents, and as long as I'm living at home and I was under their care and everything, I had to do what they said, because I had a chance to stay in. But I didn't go back to college until the following January, late January of '46. Went back to Manhattan, to the engineering school, met all my friends who were there. Got placed to a fraternity, Beta Sigma fraternity. Later on, I'll tell you that's how I got engaged. But I had a good time in college. I just was not cut out to be an engineer. I was not. While I was good in math, I just couldn't visualize building a building or building a dam or building. It just I just didn't do it. I left college in my junior year. But later on in life, I went back and transferred everything to business school, which is what I should have done in the beginning. While in college, Marty and I and Freddie at the service and everything, we reorganized our baseball team. We reorganized in the Pier Park Indians. We ourselves, physically and manually, rehabilitated that ball field because during the war it went to pot. We went down to City Hall and told them that what we were going to do. One of my mother's very good friends' husband was the Commissioner of Public Works in the city of Yonkers, and he sent up everything we needed. Didn't send any manpower, but he sent up tools and whatever we needed. Steam roller, road roller, the works. So during the spring of '46, starting in February when the ground was still hard, we got chopped out all the bogs and everything else. And by March, beginning of April, we had the team in working order. And while I was in college, we played in 1946. We didn't play in the league. The league hadn't been formed. The league was formed late 1946, and we were still playing teams around Westchester County and around Yonkers. In 1947, we organized a team. The guy that owned the corner store, we got him. He bought our uniforms. He owned the delicatessen, and he would come down at the games and sell soda and whatever, and keep the money. We would pass the hat around during each game. Most of our games were played at that field because we drew the largest crowds of any of the teams, the 7 teams in the league. 1947, we were undefeated during the entire season. We won 12 straight games. We won the city championship. I even hit a triple with the bases loaded to win 1 game, which I'm very proud of. We had a very good team. We had 2 players on our team who later played in minor leagues. One of them played. We had 2 high school kids. We were all veterans except 2 high school kids who, after they graduated, we took them on the team. And one of them went on to play with the Montreal in the International League. There's a picture up there. One of our other pitcher played in the minor leagues while we were playing in our league, and if he had time off, he'd come play on our game. So it was a pretty good league.
What position did you play?
I played the outfield. I had a strong arm, fair hitter. Loved it. That was my first love. It later became my second. But then after I started dating Betty Ann, well, that's jumping it. But I had a I had a choice, which was an easy choice. It was either baseball or going to Rockaway to see Betty Ann because her family went there every summer. So I gave up baseball. It was simple as that. But I loved it. I truly loved it. We would be down. We lived on that field. Even after I was in my older years, a couple of 3 years ago, I'd still hit golf balls down in the outfield. That was growing up in the Pier Park. I tell you, was a hell of a lot nicer than growing up in the high rises or any other part of Yonkers. Even though there were some Ritchie parts of Yonkers, but it was good.
So you were in college while you were playing baseball.
Yeah.
And then what happened in college? Or you said at some point you left college, or what made you decide to leave?
Because I just couldn't fathom engineering. It was just difficult for me then after a while. I mean, it got, in my junior year, I was so happy to finish that year, and that was the end of it. I just couldn't, as I said before, I just couldn't visualize building a bridge or a tunnel. Although I worked for the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, building that tunnel for one summer. But I was out of place. And it was then that I should have switched to the business school, which I did later on in life. But I was, during my time in college, I met a girl who lived around the corner from me, and I went with her for about a year and a half. And while I was going with that girl, I met Betty Ann.
So how did you meet Betty Ann?
I met Betty Ann. You talk about odds. Betty Ann, I'll tell you, I was going to the Valentine's dance with Marty and Freddie. Betty Ann and two of the girls from the neighborhood who I knew, Rita and Irene, I knew them very well, even though they were younger than I and weren't in my social area. Going to the dance, I didn't know.
Where was the Valentine's dance?
The dance was at St. Anthony's Parish Hall, which was diagonally across the street from where we were standing on the corner. So I saw them going in, and I said, "Hey, guys, let's down, see what's happening." Down to the dance, and hi Irene, hi Rita. They said, "This is our friend we work with in New York City. She'd come up to go to the dance." I said, "All right. She like to dance?" She said, "Sure." So we're dancing, and now I'm in my area. Huh? So I'm playing BTO, I guess you want to call it. I said, you can't get a drink here. All I have is soda. And I said, "Would you like to go somewhere else?" I didn't figure she'd say. She says, "I'd love to." Now, to my surprise, she said that. And I'm broke. That's the reason I was down there, because Marty and Freddie and I were going to college on the GI Bill. And we hadn't gotten our subsistence checks. So I says, "Holy mackerel." So I said, "Okay." I said to the guys, I said, "We'll take the girls over to Mike Owens, which is one of our watering holes just on the other side of the parkway," which we did. I says, "I'll explain to Mike that I don't have any money." I said, "He'll hang me up." We got there, the six of us. I said, "Hey, Mike, come here. Do me a favor. I need you to run a tab." I said, "I'm good for it," because I'm there every other night. He says, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." So he brings us 6 beers over, and he says, "It's on me. It's my birthday." Betty Ann says, "Tonight is my birthday, too." Now, Mike is as Irish as you could get. You could cut it with a brogue. Betty Ann says, "I'm Irish, too." It was "Happy birthday, Mike. Happy birthday, Betty Ann." And when it was time to go, and a couple of hours later, I says to Mike, "Okay, how much do I owe you? And I'll get it to you tomorrow." Forget about it. He says, "This was a birthday party." It was then I should have realized this is a girl. This is a girl I should have hung on to, but I didn't. And I don't know why I didn't, but I didn't. So I stayed, I dated this other girl, I kept dating her, and we broke up. In the meantime, Betty Ann is still working or having lunch with Rita and Irene in the city, and here's another chance. Now, what would the odds be that I would be at that dance and Betty Ann coming from, she told me she was from Washington Heights. I didn't even know where Washington Heights was now. What kind of chance would you say that would be, that the two of us would be at that particular spot at that particular time? I figured no chance at all. Now, how about this one? Rita and Irene, as I say, were not in my social circle. They were on the other side of the parkway. I'm walking out of my house one night later on that year. Who walks down the street? Rita and Irene. Rita says, how would you like to go to our club's formal dinner dance? I said, I said, you know I don't have a date, because Rita went to school with the girl I was going with. And Irene said, if we get you a date, would you go? And she says to Rita, B.A., which means Betty Ann. And she said, remember the girl you met at this Valentine's dance? I said, wow. I said, I don't know, she'll go with me. Says, if she does, will you take her? I said, yeah. I said, be happy to. And that's how we got our first date. They also set us up with a second date, which was New Year's Eve. By chance, that first date was the blizzard of 47. I mean, all these things, you say, this had to be, was the blizzard of 47. And that dinner dance was postponed until the Saturday after New Year's, rather than the Saturday after Christmas. So the Saturday after New Year's was really then our first date. And again, I made an ass of myself. I was BTO, because now this is really that's my club. Yeah. We didn't like each other. No, she didn't like me anyway. And if that was our first date, if that was going to be our first date, and we would never have seen each other. But thank God we had another date the following Saturday. And then I was acting like the gentleman that I really am. And then we started dating. We started dating immediately. That's when I had to quit my baseball team, and I didn't realize that they go to Rockaway starting Memorial Day, and my first game is Memorial Day, so I had to quit. But during the time we were dating, I took her to the Manhattan College junior prom. It was at the Hotel McAlpin, and we got along great. We had a great dating, great courtship. So much so that I was pushing her to get married, and she kept putting me off. As a matter of fact, we danced at the junior prom. I said to her, I says, honey, I think we ought to get married. She says, we will, but don't rush me. And so I pinned her with my fraternity pin. I figured that was good. We got engaged in September, but all that time we were going, she was in Rockaway from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Now, it was hard enough for me to travel from Napier Park on the number 5 trolley, get off at the Getty Square in Yonkers to the number 2 trolley, get off and get on the West Side subway, and get off the subway at 168th Street and walk up to where she lived at 172nd Street. Going down wasn't bad, but coming home, the number 5 trolley stopped running at midnight. So we had to have quick goodbyes. Sometimes they weren't, and I'd try to get the train at Spite and Dival, which I'd miss. Stay on the trolley, and if the number 5 wasn't where it was supposed to be, I'd stay on the number 2, and I'd walk home in 2.5 miles at 2 o'clock in the morning, or 3 o'clock in the morning. But when she was in Rockaway, though, I said I stayed overnight. She'd find me a boarding place, and I'd stay in a room because I just didn't want that long trip. Because it took me even an hour longer because I had to take the Long Island Railroad and everything. So that was fun. That was fun. We got engaged that summer. Oh, that's September. We got engaged at the Glen Island Casino, which was the home of the big bands. Glenn Miller was there, and not when I got engaged, but these are the bands that were out there. Tommy Dorsey. So then we decided wait to get married in following October.
So what kinds of things were you doing? You went to Far Rockaway, so you were going to the beach, and what other things did you do?
Oh God, yeah, I have pictures of us at the beach. Yeah, I get there on a Saturday morning, and she'd meet me at the train, show me where I was going to stay that night. I'd be with her family. We got along fine, got along great, as a matter of fact. Her father-in-law, I got along terrifically. And we'd hang out at the beach. We'd hang out at the beach all day long. We'd go to drink beer at night, dance at night. Then around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, I'd have to start my voyage home. We had friends down there too, Betty Ann's friends. They were her friends who became my friends. And one couple, one of the women was Betty Ann's bridesmaid at our wedding. And we see them a lot in Florida, even though they live here in Jersey. So I have met a whole lot of people through Betty Ann who I consider friends. And all our times that I went to Rockaway every single weekend, even after we were married, because then Betty Ann's mother and Betty Ann's sister, and they would take a bungalow, and we'd go there after we were married. So
during that time, you left college, and then what were you doing after you left college?
I worked as tell you one of my fraternity brothers his father was a big deal in New York City. He was a commissioner of public works, and they were building the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. So I worked there for a while as a concrete inspector, because I used my engineering concrete inspector. Actually, that's what it was. I was an inspector for the Port Authority, New York, New Jersey Port Authority. Then I went to work at the docks in New York City. New York City was building another pier and a building for garbage trucks to go up and dump garbage. And I was on that job, an estimator. I was estimating concrete, estimating bricks, reading the plans and doing the estimate. That part of engineering I liked. And that was with George A. Fuller, and I applied for a job right after that with Turner Construction, and as an estimator, and I would finish college then, and I had the job, tremendous paying job. When he told me where it was, I said, where is this great job? Guam. And I said goodbye. So then I started working. Then I went to work for Nabisco as a salesman, and that's what I did for the rest of my life. I did sales.
So do you want to tell a little bit about your wedding, what that was like?
Oh, yeah, that was a good time. really. Betty Ann was so good. I wouldn't have made it without her. It's the best thing that happened. It's ridiculous. And we got married on October 15th at her church in Washington Heights. Her uncle was a priest, and he married us. My brother was my best man. My best friend Marty was one of the ushers. Her sister was her maid of honor, and she had a cousin who was one of the bridesmaids, and her friend was another bridesmaid. And her brother was my other usher. And the mass was at 11 o'clock. And we had our reception in Bronxville, the Hotel Gramerton, which is no longer there. And we went to Bermuda on our honeymoon. We went back there a few times to Bermuda. It was fun. We had a great time. She took this country boy. Hope you can cut this out. No, she took this country boy in a lifetime of true love, happiness, and fun as we traveled the world together, which we did.
So where did you start out? Where did you live? Where was your first place that you lived when you got married?
Oh, we lived here in Yonkers. We lived here in Yonkers on Warburton Avenue, overlooking the Hudson River. Our entire apartment faced the Hudson River, faced the Palisades, and we were there. We were there for almost nine years, and we adopted our children while we were there. We adopted Billy anyway. We didn't. I don't think we. Liz Ann was later on. We adopted Billy in 1958. That was another best thing in my life. Was those kids. Then from there we moved to upstairs in my mother's house. Then a couple of years after that, we bought a house in the Pier Park, where I was raised. We bought a house 3 houses away from my mother. We fixed that house up, and then we bought a house in Holdfield, about a mile away, and we spent 36 years there. And we sold that and moved here. We weren't movers. We weren't movers when I was a kid, and we weren't movers after I got married. But we traveled a lot. Betty Ann and I traveled. We did a lot of traveling before kids, and a lot of traveling with the kids, and a whole lot of traveling after the kids were grown.
So after you were married, you were working for Nabisco that time?
I worked for Nabisco. I worked for Nabisco as a salesman, and I got promoted when Nabisco then went into a frozen food division, and I got promoted and I became a regional manager of the frozen food division, and I enjoyed that job. I worked out of New York, and then I had my own office in Hartsdale. Then they weren't doing too well in there. Nabisco wasn't doing too well with that division. They decided to drop it, and I decided to leave.
How many years had you worked there?
19 years. And I decided to leave, and I got a good severance package when I left, as far as money went. And I was over friends, and he said, I'm going into New York, why don't you come down with me? And we looked in the Times, and there was a position open for a frozen food sales manager. I applied for the position, got the position, and that's when I started my traveling around the country.